Thank you. Very good morning, Lord Peach. Very good morning to all of the hardcore enthusiasts of Western Balkans. My sympathies and understanding goes out to all those registered participants who couldn't make it this morning. Sometimes when you have a two-day conference in Budapest and you spend the night here around in the pubs and restaurants, the conference hall next morning is just a bridge too far. So we need to understand them as well and see them later on. My second remark would be when Director Schöber asked me to moderate this discussion of ours. I checked the bio of Lord Peach and I was really, really shocked. You've been such a high-ranking military official, such a splendid career, and myself as a foot soldier of infantry, how I dare to ask you questions. You know, maybe in a military environment I wouldn't be able even to serve you coffee. So, sorry in advance. And obviously I need to ask you a personal question that your successor as chairman of the NATO Military Committee, General Peč-Pavel, is just beginning his tenure as president of the Czech Republic, and obviously I was thinking whether you have some similar plans back home in becoming more active in the UK politics or not. But anyway, very welcome. It's a pleasure to receive you here in Hungary, and obviously we need to talk about Western Balkans and the changing security architecture of Europe, but we cannot really address this issue without referencing to the war in Ukraine, because obviously this is something that is deeply, besides being a disturbing development in our neighborhood, but it affects what's going on in the Western Balkans as well. So how you see this situation, Lord Stuart?
Well, thank you. And first of all, can I thank the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade here in Hungary and, of course, the organisers from the Institute for the invitation. And I really enjoyed the events yesterday, but they also serve to demonstrate how the region feels as well as all the issues the region generates. I, too, wish to congratulate President Pavel on his appointment. He was my predecessor in Brussels. We are good friends, and I'm sure he'll be a very good representative of the Czech people. I have no political ambition. I am what is called a crossbencher in the House of Lords, and for the absence of doubt, that means I'm not affiliated to any political party, and the crossbenchers vote according to their conscience. And my conscience and my role, appointed personally by the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, is to show not just an interest in the Balkans, but to show a commitment to the Balkans in many different ways. We work extremely closely with all of our allies and friends in the region, including our friends in Europe and the European Union. There is not, please don't read into my appointment this has got anything to do with Brexit. And we work extremely closely with our friends in the United States. Why? Because we have been in your region for many years and we intend to stay with you as long as is necessary. We have a shared interest and we see a vital role in the region as part of Europe, the heart of Europe. I've heard various analogies, even including yesterday, I think one of our speakers called it the patio of Europe. I think the heart of Europe is a good description. And we want to see, along with our allies and friends, a strong and prosperous region built on democracy, the rule of law, human rights, and I will add, deliberately, regional cooperation. I was privileged to be invited last year to this event, and I remember it was 2 days after the start of the war, and I remember sitting on the panel, and I said, we must not allow political problems in this region to become security issues. And I do repeat that phrase because I think a year into the war, forgive me, Mr. Moderator, I think many of the tensions in the region are still there, and I'm sure the next panel will talk to them. And I have traveled to the region almost 40 times in the last year, and I see the past everywhere. And we can talk about individual places, regions, cross-border issues, and many others, which I'm sure we'll touch on in this panel. Again, I want to be very clear. We see too much evidence of organized crime, which not just dominates the criminality, but it also affects the lives of the people, including vulnerable adults and children. We also see, at a more senior level, strategic competition, and I think we must call it out. Sitting here in Budapest with all of our friends from the region, Russia continues to use hybrid tools to pursue its goals during the illegal war in Ukraine, which are contrary to international norms and threaten the security of the region. We see the tragedy befalling the Ukrainian people, and we also see the tragedy befalling the Russian people. We have no quarrel with the Russian people. So defense and security issues may not be the theme of this conference, but they cannot be ignored in the interests of the other issues that we discussed yesterday. And we must not allow, and I do repeat myself on purpose, political crises to become the next security problems.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. You mentioned hybrid warfare, and you mentioned the very delicate situation that the region is deeply involved. And I also know that you are personally, and your government is also very much involved in in creating an environment conducive for cybersecurity. How you see this issue regarding Western Balkans?
I think we have, for many years in the think tank community, which many of you are distinguished members, in many conferences and in many governments, we've been talking about this problem for years. And during my time as the military head of NATO, we moved from talk to action, and we developed a number of capabilities to both support individual allies and operate as an alliance. The UK has been tackling and thinking about cyber for a very long time, and I've played a small part in that journey. And we, as the UK, were particularly pleased to join Albania and the United States in publicly attributing the 2022 attack to the state of Iran, the attack in Albania. And we have also continued to work with our NATO partners to support them on cyber, because it's not any longer a theoretical risk, it's a real risk. So what do? We need to work together with you in the region to strengthen your resilience. And we continue with a number of initiatives. And I'll begin deliberately with one which sounds soft, which is the UK has created a cybersecurity fellowship for young people. And I had the privilege a few weeks ago in Tirana of issuing the postgraduate certificates to those people at a reception in Tirana. And this is a light-hearted story on one level. But those individuals who I gave their degree certificates to, during the reception that followed in the next 30 minutes, they were both given very important roles and jobs in the Albanian cyber community. And that's what I'm keen to encourage as an envoy with our friends and allies, that we need to bring young people into the cyber world and train them and educate them and work together so that everybody understands the risks that we face. And it's the young engineers and young scientists that will help us to counter those threats. We work with the private and the public sector in partnership. We have some very interesting and innovative ideas to do that. And we're also working in Bosnia and Herzegovina on their national cybersecurity capability. But resilience is a big thing. It's rarely talked about on the think tank circuit. But national resilience following the war in Ukraine, the COVID pandemic, as well as the physical threats we see not far away from here, let's be honest, of earthquakes and the like, means that national resilience needs to have a higher priority. The UK continues to invest heavily in cyber in our own country, updating IT, and working with like-minded friends, allies, and partners. And the Western Balkans is a high priority for UK investment. And so we look forward to working with you to create more capability and learning from you And of course, every time there's an attack and there's a response, there are lessons to be learned, and we need to develop mechanisms to share those lessons.
Thank you, Lord Stuart. You mentioned at the beginning that UK is committed to the region, and we talked about cybersecurity, defense issues, but in more general terms, what other means do you see how UK engages in the region?
Well, I've been working on some of these issues myself for decades, and I think my direct answer to the question is by bringing together a blend of skills and sharing with allies and partners across the range of defense, security, economics, and civic society. There are many ways to do that, and there are many programs with which we can do that. We need to look at particularly vulnerable areas. I've already mentioned resilience, and I'll come back to it. And we continue to work not just on resilience, but I think everybody in this room, regardless of nationality, would agree that we need to, all of us, work more closely on disinformation, because it is a real threat to people's perceptions, it's a real threat to their way of life, and it's a real threat, if I could use a very casual word, to their mood. And there's a bad mood created by disinformation, often by accident. Those who wish us harm create that. Beyond that, what we do is we support the military missions. I said last year, and I'm very clear on this, and almost 30 years after the war, we should not need an international force in Bosnia and Herzegovina, but we do. The UK continues to support, through NATO, the Kosovo force in Pristina. And now that is NATO's largest overseas mission. We spent over £50 million last year on Western Balkans security and resilience issues. I've already mentioned cyber. I've already mentioned organized crime. What I think we need to be clearer about, there are links between the two. There are people who benefit, criminals who benefit from cybersecurity, and therefore we need to work across boundaries on border security, on policing, on intelligence support. It's tricky work, and many people are reluctant to embrace it or talk about it, on national security structures. So what we can do is bring knowledge and expertise to all of that. The UK's particular offer is through the UK Export Finance Initiative. We can be very quick in approval of projects, including for infrastructure. And then the last thing to say, I travel across the region a lot. By air, because of necessity, because the infrastructure is so poor. And I know there are experts in the room. And if I had a call today, it would be that we need to cooperate regionally on infrastructure. We can make jokes about rail travel in the 19th century, but rail travel in the 21st century in this region is quite challenging. We can make jokes about the difficulties of airlines and aeroplanes and airports in the region, but frankly, this region deserves better airports and better integrated networks. So I don't think infrastructure gets sufficient attention at the strategic level, and we're very keen to help with that. We work very closely with the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development to do precisely that.
So you spent some time in Kosovo yourself, obviously some years ago. How you see the developments taking part in Kosovo regarding the Pristina-Belgrade relationship. Obviously, Bosnia-Herzegovina is also a very hot spot. How you see what kind of developments are the most crucial right now?
Well, of course, we support absolutely without reservation the EU-facilitated dialogue between Pristina and Belgrade. We're not in the room, but we're strongly supporting it, and I am personally traveling to the region in that support, and I work very closely with both the European Union Special Representative Miroslav Lajčák, who I call a friend, and Gabriel Escobar for the United States, who I also call a friend. And of course, we look forward to the forthcoming meeting in Ohrid and an agreement if that can be reached. The next steps will be crucial. And of course, as we know, and I know from my military career of 50 years, the detail is always in the implementation. But we look forward to leadership, we look forward to calm flexibility, and we look forward to proposals that can make this work. The long-term prize is clear. any of the hotspots, as you call them, where we can find international agreement, that's a prize for us all, because that will lead to normalization across boundaries and across the region, which helps, as we heard yesterday on the big panel with the ministers, that helps enormously on that EU Euro-Atlantic journey. I always say Euro-Atlantic because what is often undersaid in these conferences is the importance of NATO membership as part of the Euro-Atlantic journey for the countries of the region. And I would always urge NATO allies, as a former military head of the alliance, to talk to each other and cooperate. Specifically on Bosnia and Herzegovina, I cannot see at all how calls for secession are helpful. They're not. And as I said earlier, we must be really cautious about allowing political challenges and crises to become security problems. Therefore, I reiterate the importance of both the KFOR mission in Kosovo and the European Union force mission in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which the UK continues to support through NATO. And I offer my unequivocal support for the EU policing mission in Kosovo, EULEX. All of these missions play a crucial role in supporting a safe and secure environment whilst the politics works. And we must find time to make the politics work. We welcome the recent elections in Bosnia and Herzegovina and the formation of a Council of Ministers. We now need to see, as I've said about the Belgrade-Pristina dialogue, we now need to see implementation. And that's what the UK, along with our friends and allies and partners, will be working on. But it is also true that it's time in 2023 for the political leaders in Bosnia and Herzegovina to discard their ethno-nationalist agenda and work together for the good of the country. That country has so much potential, and we need to remind them that they have potential, and the more they work together, the more likely they are to realize that potential, and to be very serious, then fewer of the wonderful young people of Bosnia and Herzegovina will leave the country and emigrate.
Sir, your career as a military official and your present assignment as well makes you the perfect target for my next question, and that's how you assess, or UK how does assess the external actors, external influences being present in the region, namely Russia and China?
Mainly, but not only Russia and China. I think Russia has a long-term goal. It is simply a full range of tools at low cost to Russia, but high gain to Russian influence. And we need to be aware of it, call it out when necessary, and also help all the countries of the region recognize disinformation for what it is. And there are many tools, as I've said earlier, to do it. We also need to recognize the societal issues which you can school us on from the region and the weaknesses in a febrile media environment. And I'm often struck, traveling as much as I do in your region, just how much media there is and how hard it is sometimes to understand why everything has to be so divisive. As for China, I think it's a more subtle influence and not necessarily always helpful. Across the globe, the United Kingdom, we see China leveraging infrastructure investments as a tool to create debt, and then after the debt has been created, coercion tends to follow. It's very different to the more hybrid activity of Russia, but it's nonetheless dangerous. We also need to be aware, and if necessary, call it out, when Russia crosses the threshold and is directly influencing political parties within the region. So there's a wide range of activity, and a lot of the understanding is hard to find because, of course, Russia and China and others will go to great lengths to hide it. Therefore, I return to my earlier call for better sharing of information intelligence, better cooperation to understand how we can help to counter what Russia and China is doing to actually knock the region away from the Euro-Atlantic journey.
Sir, I really appreciate your answers. Thank you very much for your contribution, and we really hope to see you again here next year.
And thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to the next panel. But it's a very great privilege to be here. Thank you to our hosts. And more importantly, I always say the same thing. Why do I do this as a grandfather? Is to try and work together with friends and allies to give hope to the next generation in this wonderful region. Thank you.
Thank you.